Hello, Peppers. Look who's back. Dr. David Smith.
I am back.
Tell us who you are, Dr. David Smith.
I'm Dr. David Smith. I work at the University of Sydney in the US Studies Centre, and I have a PhD in political science from the University of Michigan.
And I am Shazza Jadello, and I am so unwelcome at the ABC that we are currently filming this podcast in 2SER radio station. The ABC don't want us. They don't want us anything to do with us. So welcome to 2SER. This is, I think, our new home. I don't want to tell us our school, but I think this will be our new home.
It's great to be here.
Yes, indeed. And thank you very much to Brendon for filling in.
Yes, I very much like to thank Brendon for filling in last week. He did a fantastic job. Because he's not very good at self-promotion. He actually published 3 books last year, which is quite extraordinary for an academic.
Tell us the best one. The best ones.
He had a single-authored book on American exceptionalism and anti-Americanism and the relationship between them, which is fantastic.
Yep.
He had a book with 2 other co-authors about ideology in US foreign policy. I think particularly his chapter was on Reagan. And he was also a contributor to the same book that I was, How America Compares.
Which of his books would you put on the book list?
Let's put the one, American Exceptionalism and Anti-Americanism on there, because that's his opus that he's been working towards for a very long time.
Well, look, that is all very impressive, but I must say the thing I liked best about Brendon is not only did he say yes when I asked him to come on, but also he called it a show. I love that he called this podcast a show. We're now a show, Dr. Dave.
Fantastic. Anyway, thank you very much, Brendon.
Thank you.
Hugely appreciated. Very valued colleague.
For those wondering about the hand of God, we are being filmed today, but not by the hand of God. He is still sick, but he is getting better. I think he'll be back next week.
Okay.
We're being filmed by the wonderful and heavenly, not quite godly, but very close, Oscar. Hello, Oscar. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Oscar.
He also has hands. Show us your hands, Oscar. There you go.
Yeah, excellent.
But they're not heavenly hands, but they're very close. Now, let's get on to today. Now, for those who just came from our Friday show, which you can see on our Facebook page, Facebook.com/ABC Planet America, or on iView, we did a lot of talking about Kamala Harris, unsurprisingly.
Yes.
That's obviously the major story of the week. I crammed as much information as I could about it, but there was plenty of stuff left over. So I'm just going to start just getting to all the stuff I didn't get to. And you jump in as you please, or anything you have to say. I talked about the fact that if you're going to criticise her, a good place to start is on her record as an Attorney General or as a prosecutor before that. Mm-hmm. I told you some things, but I saved some of my favourite things for the podcast. They'll take a little bit longer. One is just a little side. Dr. Dave knows that I'm quite a fan of civil asset forfeiture.
Yes.
Kamala Harris was a big fan of civil asset forfeiture.
She was a huge fan of civil asset forfeiture.
Yeah, yes. she was promoting it hard, and she particularly she enjoyed very much the idea of taking people's property without there being any kind of criminal conviction. She was a big fan of that.
Yes.
So good on her. She's also a fan of throwing prostitutes in jail. She did an awful lot of that when she was in California.
Yeah, and I think this is a classic example of just total over-policing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very, very sympathetic to the view that there's a whole range of activities where you just don't need police at all. And, prostitution's one of them. So.
Yeah, she's one of those people who says, it's not about prostitutes, it's about sex trafficking. It's about trafficking. It's about trafficking people and trafficking sex. And you go, but it's prostitutes that you're throwing in jail. It's not the sex. It's not the people you throw in jail are not the kingpins who are trafficking children and all the rest of it. You're just throwing street crawlers in jail. That's what you're doing.
Also, I mean, sex trafficking is one of those things that you can always rely on it to drum up public outrage. It's one of those things that tends to be chronically overestimated, how prevalent it actually is. Often, used just throughout history as a means of cracking down on sex work in general. James Morone's amazing book, Hellfire Nation, talks about actually the origins of the FBI in a sex trafficking panic centered on Jewish pimps.
Is it onto the list?
Yes, that is definitely on the list.
So tell something again.
In the early 20th century, it's called Hellfire Nation.
Hellfire Nation.
And now is exactly the time, I think, that we should actually be dialing back the talk about sex trafficking, given the centrality of it to the whole QAnon
thing. That's a great
mythos.
call.
To the extent that now, when Ivanka Trump cuts an ad advertising the federal government has put in $35 million to fight sex trafficking, you might think, why are they making an ad about that? $35 million is absolutely nothing in the scheme of things. Not to a QAnon supporter who sees that ad and believes that it's Trump telling them that everything they believe is true.
Oh, dear. Also, I mentioned Kamala Harris's her worrying tendency to double down on convictions that were proven to be wrongful convictions. I mentioned a few cases on the show. Some I didn't mention was when she appealed the dismissal of a case where the prosecutor had fabricated a confession. She appealed that, and she fought an appeal in a case where the prosecutor lied to the jury during the trial. But the worst case of all, this is one I was saving up for the podcast. Okay. There's a guy called Daniel Larson. Have you heard about this one?
No.
Okay. This guy was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison because of the three strikes law under California. He'd had 2 convictions for burglary. This time he was convicted with possession of a concealed weapon after 2 police officers testified they saw him toss a knife under a car in the parking lot of a bar.
Yep.
Okay. And so he got 27 years to life. Now, 3 strikes rules, I've got opinions about them, but let's leave that aside for a moment. Now, during his trial, his attorney, who has since been disbarred, that's always a good sign.
Wonder how many disbarred attorneys there are in the US.
I think there'd be a few.
There should be a reality show where they all live on an island together. And all kind of scam each other.
And you don't even put a camera there. You just leave them on the island and then just sail away.
Attorney Island. We need to make this happen.
Anyway, so he's during his trial, his disbarred attorney didn't call a single witness.
Well,
wait.
Saves time.
That's true. It was efficient. Even though there were 9 available witnesses to testify, they saw someone else throw the knife, not Larson. Right? The court found 13 years later that Larson had shown he was actually innocent and that the police officers who testified were not credible at all and that the trial attorney was constitutionally ineffective for failing to call witnesses on his behalf. But Kamala Harris tried to appeal that. She fought that 13 years after this man had gone to jail for throwing a knife, which he hadn't done. The reason why was she said he hadn't presented proof that he was innocent quickly enough.
Right.
So enjoy another 14 years in jail, she said. So that's
pretty messed up.
That's an example of what I don't like about Kamala Harris very much, and I think that's a legitimate source.
That is
of
a completely
Another thing which I didn't get a chance to talk about is I mentioned in the podcast earlier in the year that I wasn't a fan of her policy chops. She's not very good on policy in general, and I like policy. You know that. I just want to give one example. Her policy for COVID.
Yes.
She's been pushing a policy where you give $2,000 a month till 3 months after the pandemic is over to every single person.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Let me tell you what's wrong with that, Dr. Dave. That means that you are giving to people who have jobs, paying jobs. Okay, it's up to $100,000 a year. So what that means is if you earn $99,000 a year and you are in a family of 4, you will get given $100,000 from the government for that year. That's the numbers, because it's $2,000 a person times 4 is $8,000 a person per month times 12. That's $100,000 you're giving to people who already earn $100,000.
Chaz, you're not unfamiliar with medical costs in the US, are you?
Not because they have COVID. Everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone, Dr.
Chaz,
Dave.
the way that you build political support for a welfare program is by getting rid of any kind of means testing and by making it as universal as possible.
$6 trillion, Dr. Dave. $6 trillion for 1 year.
What kind of damage do you think the United States is facing at the moment in a country where there are potentially going to be 23 million evictions?
Yeah.
In a country where probably the true death rate is already over 200,000. In a country where, we're heading towards 6 million cases. In a country where a lot of the job losses are going to be permanent.
Well,
$6 trillion isn't actually going to look like very much.
Give all those people $100,000 a year. Give all the evictees.
Chaz, no. This is not how American politics works. There has never been a successful program of let's only direct money to the most needy. You know what those programs are? Incredibly unpopular.
Yeah.
Okay, those programs are always the whipping boy of Republicans and austerity-minded Democrats. The ones that survive, it's give as much money to as many people as possible.
I reckon when you're giving $100,000 to people who earn $100,000 already, I don't think that's going to be popular.
It's everyone's getting a. I mean, it's going to be quite popular with everyone who's getting money. Which is
that's true. Well, I suppose that's,
everyone.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Yes. That's okay. We can agree to disagree on that one, Dr. Dave. That's okay. There are a couple of things I didn't mention. Another thing which one thing I did mention was the cognitive dissonance that's going on with some people, where they're simultaneously accusing her of being a socialist anarchist and a corporatist Wall Street lackey, which it's very difficult to be both of them at the same time. Generally, because Wall Street aren't a big fan of anarchists. Generally speaking,
about the Republican attack sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, they really don't know what to do with her, because I think they do. They want to try and appeal to both the anti-police faction and the pro-police faction at the same time in American life, and trying to do it in the same ads. Now, my friend Rhonda pointed out...
Is this a real person?
This is a real person.
Okay, all right.
Rhonda is a teacher in the Wollongong area.
Okay, yeah.
She pointed out, and this is very true, that they can easily, on Facebook, micro-target in a way that will allow them to put out different messages to different groups. And I can definitely see that will happen. But at the moment, we're seeing this very confused thing of the first ad that comes out was just this really confused attempt to try to blend the two things together. Racism and anti-racism, pro-police and anti-police, Wall Street shill and socialists. It's very confused. It reflects the broader problem that they're having with really pinning anything on Biden. As well. Yeah, well, sorry, bang the table.
Oh, sorry, yeah. The enthusiasm with which they jumped on Kamala Harris, it was like, oh, thank God! It really, I thought, said a lot about how much they're not laying a glove on Biden.
Yeah, but I don't think they're laying a glove on her.
Well, so they've only had a day.
But
no, not so far. What I find interesting, though, is the legitimate smears versus the illegitimate smears. It's like they're smears. There's two levels of smearing going on. There's the socialist whatever. I mean, I don't think they work, but that's par for the course in the political campaign. But then the name you're not hearing at all on TV is the name Willie Brown. And that's the only name you're hearing on the internet.
Right, yes.
It's really interesting that on Fox News, I haven't heard a single person saying the words Willie Brown, but on the internet, on our Facebook page, is just non-stop Willie Brown. And for those
non-stop Willie Brown.
For those who don't know,
we're not talking about the former West German Chancellor.
No, well, I imagine there was a lot of confusion until you pointed it out. So thanks for that, Dr. Dave. But for those who don't know what I'm talking about, Willie Brown was a guy who. He was 60. Kamala Harris was about 30 when she started. They talk about an extramarital affair, but it was barely. I don't think you can call it extramarital affair because the guy was separated. But whatever, it was. She had a relationship with a guy who was established in San Francisco.
Shocking.
And he recommended her for a couple of positions, not like that, but for a couple of district attorney kind of type stuff. It's not like he gave her jobs.
Yeah.
But he was basically her patron for a year or two.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, there's a lot of, slept to the top, et cetera, et cetera. And you just go, okay, well, number one, this guy also was the patron of Pelosi, Newsom, Feinstein, a whole bunch of other California.
Yes.
He was a guy who liked to spread the love around. And yes, I did make that on purpose. But no... But he got this guy was a patron to a lot of people, not just Kamala Harris, and also he made the point himself that that Kamala Harris, this is a quote from him, he said the difference between Kamala is Kamala was the only one who, after I helped her, sent word that I would be indicted if I so much as jaywalked while she was DA. So
her love of punishment overwhelmed any
everything else.
sense of loyalty to him.
Don't get between
that's
her
great.
and a jail.
Yeah, also, I don't think that nepotism is going to be a winning issue for
No,
the
of course it's not.
Trump campaign. I mean, it's like in the same way, I'm pretty sure brain power isn't going to be a winning issue for the Trump campaign.
Yes.
But Trump is just absolutely convinced. And I was wondering about this until I suddenly realised who on his campaign is going to tell him, no, this isn't a winning issue for you.
I'm sure. No one's going to.
No one's going to tell him that. So
No
he's going to keep on with
Yeah.
cognition is a winning issue. But yeah.
But I'm finding it fascinating the way, and I'm not going to say any of the nicknames, but there's a whole bunch of appalling nicknames. See, I don't think having a go at her for getting a leg up from some patron when she was younger, I don't think that's necessarily off limits myself. But I do think that the way they're turning it into a bunch of filthy nicknames.
On our Facebook page.
On our Facebook, especially on our Facebook page. Maybe it's just our Facebook page. Maybe the rest of the internet's clean.
We're a cesspit.
I think that is sexist.
Yes.
It's interesting the way you got these two levels.
Let's talk about the most illegitimate smear of all.
Are you talking the Bertha one?
Yes.
I've seen it. I've seen a headline. I don't know what they're talking about.
Okay,
this happened today. So tell me.
So there was an article in Newsweek by his name temporarily escapes me. Someone Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood.
No, not Clint Eastwood. Maybe I'm making this up. He's at Chapman Law School. He's a well-known lawyer figure in Trump world. He's argued for Trump before. Anyway, he has this just absolutely ridiculous op-ed in Newsweek saying Kamala Harris might not be a natural-born citizen. Now, anyone in their right mind thinks she was born in California.
Yeah, I was going to say, is he disputing that?
No, he's not disputing that she was born in California. What he's saying, and actually I'm reluctant to even repeat this to give it any credit whatsoever.
It's a headline. So
he says, oh, well, now the jurisprudence is that anyone born in the United States is a natural-born citizen. He's clearly not happy that that's the jurisprudence because he doesn't think that's what... But he even acknowledges that is the jurisprudence. He's like, whoa, but back when she was born, well, there was a bit of a different understanding. You know, lots of Mexican children were deported along with their parents, which I don't think is a fantastic argument. And he claims, well, her parents, they might have been considered transients. Right. So there's no actual... There's nothing actually here other than speculation that someone in the 60s might have thought that her parents wouldn't actually qualify her for natural-born citizenship. No other constitutional scholar that I have seen endorses this. Her parents were working academics by the time that she was born. There's no way that they were transient. Basically, he would have to be putting himself into the viewpoint of a person who's racist even by 1960s standards to believe that she wouldn't qualify for birthright citizenship under the standards of the 60s, which even by then, basically the jurisprudence was if you're born in the United States. And by the way, we don't actually judge it by the standard then. We judge it by the I mean, this is
so much bullshit
seriously
here.
this is seriously up there with people who in 1964 were saying Barry Goldwater might not be eligible because when he was born, Arizona wasn't a state yet. Checkmate.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, it's just absolutely ludicrous. But, of course, it's in Newsweek, which is a sort of reputable publication.
It's a very reputable publication.
They did quote me last week, so...
Okay. I won't diss Newsweek then.
It was in this weird article where I think that this guy contacted about 50 academics from around the world to get like one sentence each out of them.
I was about to suggest that maybe his argument made sense to look at the law back in 1960 because that's when Newsweek was relevant.
Oh, burn! But anyway, so it's in Newsweek. Newsweek had to issue an editorial saying this was not a racist birther argument, which you're already losing when you have to put in that disclaimer. But, of course, Trump says, oh, well, I saw she might not be eligible. So, yeah, just putting it out there again, just reminding everyone that Trump launched his career on a racist birther conspiracy. This is just fucking ridiculous.
I actually think that that's a bad idea from his behalf. Though,
it's a terrible idea.
Because there was a time when Trump first did this, he was fresh, and this was kind of shocking to some. To others, it was slightly naughty and exhilarating.
Yes,
Oh, you can't do that. Now it's boring to everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, there will be people who like it. Those people are voting for Trump already.
Yes.
For everyone else, and I can just see independents just going, "Oh God, we're doing this again."
Yeah.
Oh God, make it end.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's a smart tactic.
And the other, I think one of the things that is obvious now is, Trump really got hurt very badly by the George Floyd protests and his reaction to the George Floyd protests. And people in the United States don't like to think of themselves as racist.
No.
They don't like to support people who are overtly racist or who are seen by others as overtly racist. So when Trump does this stuff, even though he thinks it's a masterful dog whistle to his followers, it's not. It's a train whistle, and it actually doesn't do him any favors at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually think it's so obvious now as well that I don't even think that Democrats need to keep on pointing it out. I think it's really, really obvious. Like, there was a great example of one where I was just watching on TV and I was going, oh God. It was when something I talked about on the TV show about how one of the bogus claims about Kamala Harris is that she essentially accused, or she endorsed an accusation of sexual assault on Joe Biden, because last year when the women were saying, he's touching my hair and all the rest of it, he's been, creepy Joe. She basically just said, good on those people for coming forward. I believe them. Excellent. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, and Tucker Carlson put this to a Democrat. Like it was one of those ones where he had a lefty on as a punching bag, and he had the lefty on, and he put it to him. He said, how could Joe Biden possibly pick someone who has agreed that he sexually assaulted someone last year? And you'd think this lefty would say, well, it wasn't sexual assault that she was accusing him of. It was being a bit creepy. There's a very big difference there, Tucker. But what he actually said, and you'll know what I'm talking about as soon as I say it, is you mispronounced Kamala Harris's name like 12 times. And that's racist. And you go, no, don't do the racist thing. Just tell him, just explain that Joe Biden didn't commit sexual assault by sniffing someone's hair. Because Tucker Carlson is trying to conflate the Tara Reid allegations with the people last year. And anyway, I feel like Democrats are so keen to call racism. They don't need to do it, because Trump, when he's been racist, is obviously racist to everyone. You don't need to call it anymore. Anyway, that's
I don't know. There's a very complicated ethical debate, I think, about.
There probably is.
But, which we won't go into now.
One more bit of bullshit about Kamala Harris before we move on, unless you have something else to say, is there's a knock on, well, it's not really on her, but it's a knock on Twitter that Kamala Harris's senior communications director is in charge of Twitter's censorship. Have you heard this one?
No.
Okay. That's something that they're going on about. And especially it's relevant because Kamala Harris, one of her least successful gambits during her primary campaign was to call for Donald Trump to be banned from Twitter, which she went on and on and on about, and Elizabeth Warren was not picking it up, no matter how much Kamala Harris was throwing it down in front of her. Anyway, and so then they're going, well, hang on. Kamala Harris's senior communications director is in charge of whether Donald Trump gets banned from Twitter. You can see where this is going. Okay, that's a bit of bullshit, and I'll tell you why.
He's still on Twitter.
Well, there's that, but also on top of that, going forward, he was Kamala Harris's communications manager in 2013.
Oh,
okay, he's been Twitter's senior communications manager for 5 years.
Wow.
Right? He's not involved, according to Twitter, with any enforcement actions at all. He's just a communications guy, all right? So for those who hear that, I'm sympathetic. I'm not a fan of Kamala Harris calling for Donald Trump to be banned from Twitter. But that is a separate thing entirely too. Oh, the fix is in. She's put her guy in 6 years early into a Twitter position to seed this coup. So let's leave that aside. Do you have anything else to say about her before we move on? No. Do you want to note the fact that you're talking about QAnon, that there's now
yes,
the QAnon lady has now won her primary?
So Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia is the first QAnon candidate who has won a primary in a safe seat.
Yes.
And
she's a real QAnon. Like some of these people,
she is not backing down.
Yes. Some of these people have like hashtag QAnon in their bio, and that's it. Whereas she quote this quote from 2017. There's a once in a lifetime opportunity to take this global cabal of Satan worshipping pedophiles out, and I think we have the present to do it. That's pretty QAnon.
Yeah. So the most high profile one to this point, who's that candidate in Colorado whose name temporarily escapes me.
Lauren Bieber or
something like that.
Yeah.
She had to walk it back, basically, as soon as she became the nominee.
And she's more into guns than QAnon.
Yeah.
This woman, she's into QAnon.
Yeah, she is not walking it back at all. She's also a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. She's big on, George Soros as root of all evil. She's a real piece of work, but what she shows is this is going to be a major part of the future of the Republican Party. There's not a lot that they can do to stop it if they've got people like that winning safe congressional seats.
Even though, interestingly, did you hear the poll I had last week for Brendon about...
the number of people who've never heard of it before.
Well, there's that. But also the feelings thermometers were identical for Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
I think that's probably related to the fact that people don't know what it is.
Probably, yeah.
That is a bit of a problem with feeling thermometers as survey instruments.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more, talking about the stuff from today. I want to talk a little bit more about the mail-in voting situation. Now, on Wednesday's show, if you haven't seen this particular segment I'm about to refer to...
You keep referring to this show on this channel that has nothing to do with us anymore.
That's true. On the Wednesday show on this other pathetic network, which is not nearly as good as 2SER. I did a wall on mail-in voting, and it went for 6.5 minutes, and I spoke as fast as I could to try and cram as much information in as possible. You're not meant to do that on TV. That's terrible craft.
No.
But I always put information first. So I crammed 9 minutes of information in 6.5 minutes, but I still didn't get it all in. And so I've got some leftovers here. I want to
talk for the next 90 minutes.
No, it's not that much. Just a few little things. So the issue is essentially that we've been set up for a scenario on election night where Trump either wins or comes close to winning on election night, and then Joe Biden wins a week later.
Yes.
And Trump spends the entire week declaring it invalid, much like he did in 2018, by the way, although it didn't work out that the Republicans lost in the end. But in 2018, he spent the week going Florida for counting absentee ballots.
Yes,
I think I got a tweet here. The Florida election should be called in favour of Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis in that large numbers of new ballots showed up out of nowhere and many ballots are missing or forged. An honest vote count is no longer possible. Ballots massively infected. Must go with election night. So that's a flash. That's a sneak preview of what we have coming for us in 4 months' time.
I also remember he claimed, very early on in the night, he claimed near total victory.
Yeah.
This is in an election where Republicans lost the House of Representatives.
By 46.
To the Democrats.
Yes.
Near total victory. You would think some Republicans might look at that and think, don't know about the captain of this particular ship.
Yeah.
But
anyway, okay, so that's what we're talking about. And the one thing which I didn't talk about on Wednesday, which a lot of people are interested in, which is why I'm bringing up now, and you may be interested as well, is post office shenanigans.
Yes.
Well,
today, Trump said, if we don't give the post office the aid money, the proper funding that Democrats want to give it, then they can't count their fake ballots. He just came right out and said it. He doesn't want to fund the post office because he doesn't want them counting ballots which he has deemed fake before a single one is cast.
Yes, that is entirely fair. As in, that is what he said. Yes. I mean, I was sitting there going, oh, is he saying that?
No. You never do this with Trump. Right, you never do could you, when he's talking about minorities invading the suburbs and, going on about, the media said, fake media says they're 35%. I like to cut it a little lower at 30%. And then they come in and they change it. Like, no, you don't try to pretend, what he actually might be saying is something different. No, you say, what does this actually sound like?
Yeah.
Right. Let the fucking right-wing idiots do their idiotic passing of it because they've got hours and hours of cable news to fill getting outraged about misinterpretations of what Trump says. No, just what does it actually sound like?
I think it is fair to say, I will agree with you broadly on this, that it's fair to say that Donald Trump does not spend a lot of time thinking about his precise wording. No. And so when trying to interpret what he says, if you get very finicky about his precise wording, that is unrealistic because he's clearly trying to communicate a broad sense rather than a very fine particular meaning. Yeah. So that is fair enough. Okay.
Also, but he's the most powerful man on earth. It's his responsibility to say things clearly.
Yeah.
Every other president has understood this. Trump doesn't think that applies to him because he's got this fucking army of people whose entire life is defending him. It's bullshit. There's no need for anyone else to buy into that.
That's fair enough. But on the post office shenanigans,
yes,
so we're talking about I should say first of all that this DeJoy guy who he's put in charge of, not him, a board that was appointed by Trump. It's indirect.
Yes,
a board that was appointed by Trump.
Partisan board appointed by Trump.
As
happens to appoint a major Trump donor.
I should say, that's the thing, because you make the point which everyone makes, which is he's a major Trump donor, and he is, but there's an assumption there that he's not qualified, but he is qualified.
Oh,
he actually is. I'm not being sarcastic. He actually is.
He is qualified.
He's a guy who's like he's a logistics guy he's worked for Boeing, Verizon, Disney, United Technologies. Like he's worked for a lot of companies in logistics.
So so he's qualified because he comes from industries that are competitors to the post office.
Well, that's fair, and it's also fair to say
there's no one more qualified to wage war against the post office than for someone who's been a competitor to the post office for decades.
And it's also fair to say he owns a whole bunch of stock in competition to the post office as well, which he does. So
this is the private equity model of being qualified.
I'm not his fan, but I'm just saying he's not some random dude they just picked out, right? Like this, which they do sometimes.
He's not the CEO of Texas Labradoodles.
No, he's not.
That's true.
No, he's not. But anyway, he's got this efficiency drive, as you would expect from the person who came from Boeing, Verizon, Disney, United Technologies, etc. And just a reminder, when we talk about this efficiency drive, that the reason there's an efficiency drive is because the Postal Service is uniquely burdened in a way that almost no other business is.
Absolutely.
Which is that it has to pre-fund decades of retired employees' health funds.
75 years.
75 years. That's even more than decades.
75 years. So this was this punitive law cooked up
back in 2006.
Dennis Hastett's Congress. If you don't know about Dennis Hastett, Wikipedia him and have a fun time. Signed into law by...
Hey, QAnon, look him up.
Yeah. Signed into law by George W. Bush.
Yes, that's right.
It was this total anti-public service. The post office is particularly totemic for conservatives who hate public service in general. Can you think of some reasons why that might be? Like the very high number of African American employees, the fact that the post office, along with agencies like the DMV, has been a major vehicle for black employment. That's one of the reasons why conservatives hate it and have completely stigmatized it as this inefficient thing.
And they're generally keen on privatisation.
And they are obviously, they're very keen on privatisation. And fundamentally, they hate any part of the government that is actually popular with the American people, apart from the military.
By the way, you know who voted for that?
Who voted for that?
I don't know. You know why?
Why?
They didn't record it.
Oh!
It's one of those. It didn't even have a recorded vote.
There you go.
So anyway, if that situation didn't occur, the pensions situation,
Yes.
the post office would be making a profit, right?
It would be, yeah.
It's making a handsome profit, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's doing well.
But also, like,
doing
there
under
are a
COVID.
lot of government agencies that don't make a profit. You think the Pentagon makes a profit?
No, I don't.
No.
No, that's
Yeah,
fair
the
enough.
point of most government agencies is
Yeah.
not actually to make a profit. And the
Yeah.
post office's importance in terms of, what it's done basically since the beginning of the Republic, which is to keep the whole country together, keep the whole country connected to each other, facilitate communication. Like, yes, certainly that role has changed in the internet era, but it still exists to a very powerful degree. That has become very, very clear during the pandemic. That importance goes far beyond any prerogative of making money.
That's fair.
Yes.
Well, anyway, but let's set us all that aside for a
Setting
second.
all that
We
aside.
need to become efficient, Dr. Dave. and the way Louis DeJoy has decided to make the post office efficient is by cutting overtime. No overtime. So if you...
Yep.
if
So,
it-
in other words, you will never get through the backlog.
Yeah. If you get to 5 p.m. and the mail is not delivered, well, then you deliver it tomorrow. And then if it's not delivered by the next 5 p.m., then the next day, etc. 2 to 3 day backlog in most places at the moment. This is an interesting one. Shutting down mail sorting machines. I don't understand how that increases efficiency.
Yeah, and removing some. And so
Yeah.
there have been reports
Yeah.
today, some mail sorting machines are just vanishing.
That seems weird, doesn't it?
So
That-
it's not
that,
like
that,
they can
that
just-
seems inefficient to
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Dave.
Yep.
Anyway, and 23 postal executives were reassigned or displaced
Yes.
just before the election. Sounds a little inefficient as
Yes.
well. Sounds confusing and inefficient. But anyway, and then the other thing they've done, which once again, they'll make a profit, I guess, is they've informed states that until now,
Yep.
states had to pay 20 cents
Yes.
for a ballot.
Yep.
For a ballot, coincidentally. Now they're paying 55 cents.
Yes.
For a ballot.
Yeah, no,
So
it's just
it's-
punitive.
So so there's a bit of that going on as well. So that's the situation with the post office, because I didn't get a chance to talk about it in the show, and that's why people are saying this is a complete joke. I should say that if they don't get their money, if they don't get their $3.5 billion, what Trump is saying is untrue. He's saying, if you don't get $3.5 billion, you can't do the mail-in votes. Yes, they can.
Yeah.
They can just do them badly.
Yes.
And that he probably doesn't care if they do them badly,
No.
because it will be more Democrats than Republicans at the moment who are doing mail-in votes. But it's not going to stop
Yes.
the mail-in votes.
Although there has been this interesting thing. Did you see his tweet urging people to vote by mail in Florida?
Yes, I did. I've got it right here.
Yeah. Now, this was interesting, and this is not just because he votes by mail.
I'll read it out. Yeah, it's not just for him.
Yeah.
Whether you call it vote by mail or absentee voting, in Florida, the election system is safe and secure, tried and true. Florida's voting system is being cleaned up. We defeated Democrats' attempts at change. So in Florida, I encourage all to request a ballot and vote by mail.
So Florida's the only place where he wants everyone voting by mail because it's all been cleaned up. The alligators are out of the mailboxes. Okay, so why is this the case? Well, it's because Florida is one of those states, like Colorado, which has actually sorted out a very efficient system for counting mail ballots,
Yes.
because this is an issue they've had to deal with for a long time. Probably because late mail ballots played such a major role in the 2000 election. I don't know if that was what got the... But basically, Florida actually... 2018 notwithstanding, it is believed Florida's got the capacity to count them all on the night.
That's right.
It's got the capacity to count them all on the night. It's one of the places where it's been reported to the alarm of Republicans that there's a huge differential between Democrats and Republicans.
Yep.
And it's one of those places where the course of the coronavirus at this point is very unpredictable.
Yes.
So, and also, perhaps most importantly of all, basically if Biden wins Florida, there are very few ways in which he can lose the election.
That's right. And remember, what Trump is trying to engineer a situation of is that where he's ahead on the night.
Exactly.
And so if Florida, if it backfires on him, the mail-in voting thing in Florida, they will find out on the night.
Yes. Yeah.
So
if
that's,
Florida goes, it does not matter about the upper Midwest.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So that is an interesting. And by the way, for those who for fair-minded listeners, you might be going, well, is Florida different to the other states? No, It's not.
No.
I'll talk you through some. In fact, I'll talk you through some stuff right now. There are some things with Trump when Trump talks about mail-in voting. I've talked about it before on this show.
Yes.
That there are some problems with mail-in voting, and he's identified some of them that are legitimate. Like, for instance, he talked about the voting rolls being a shocker. Yes, they are a shocker. The voting rolls are out of date, and it's a problem. It's a problem for people who aren't trying to sabotage the election.
Yeah.
It's a problem because take Nevada, for instance, in their primary just now, 17% of the mail-in votes were sent to the wrong address because they weren't mistakes, but they hadn't updated the people from moving or dying or whatever. And you go, okay, that's 17% of people who don't get a vote.
Yes.
That's a problem. So he's right on that. He's probably not worried about the same thing I'm worried about.
No, which is people not voting.
Yes, but
what he's worried about is people actually voting.
Yeah, but the voting rolls are a problem in a lot of states. He's right about that, and they should fix it up. And interestingly, the states that have nailed mail-in voting, like Oregon and Colorado and Washington, their voting rolls are absolutely perfect because they need to be.
Absolutely perfect.
They are. They really like that.
Well, I'm wary of saying that anything is absolutely perfect.
Okay, I might have overstated.
Yes, that's a very Trumpian construction.
That is true.
Absolutely perfect.
They're very strong, very strong. You've never seen rolls like the voter rolls in Colorado. No, look, they're much better than the rest of the country because that's an essential element of mail-in voting, getting it right.
Yes.
And so anyway, so that's something they should clean up, ideally, with some money. He's also right about ballot harvesting, which he's mentioned a few times, and I've also mentioned before.
You've crapped on about this. Yes.
Which is...
You don't need to revisit that.
For those who weren't listening in February, I'll just be very quick. What were you looking like that for?
I've heard this so many times. Okay.
In summary,
yes,
ballot harvesting is when someone can go door to door and pick up other people's ballots for them. And if you have a situation where you have, say, an overbearing college student who goes to 1,000 different doors in a nursing home, they might have an effect on the way those people fill out their forms. They're not supposed to, but they may potentially. And when there's been big fraud involved with mail-in voting, it's usually involving ballot harvesting, which is usually illegal. But in California, it's legal. It's now legal in Nevada as well. So I agree with him about that. But it's not going to be a big factor because it's just California and Nevada. Yeah. And neither of them are likely to make any difference.
Be the tipping point.
Right. So that's enough on ballot harvesting. But I also agree with him. There's one other thing he says which is not given enough publicity. When he talks about signature check, that now you do not have mail-in voting without someone signing something. But not every state checks the signatures.
Right.
They check there is a signature, but not every state checks it against the roll to make sure it is your signature.
Right.
And I'll tell you the states that don't check automatically. They only check if there's funny business, right? If they're suspicious. Connecticut, Vermont, Washington, D.C., Maryland, New Mexico, Wyoming, Iowa. Now, out of those states, the only one that could potentially be a swing state is Iowa. If Iowa is in play, the election is over. Let's face it. That's not going to be decisive in this election. But I personally agree with Trump that every single place should check the signatures. I think that's a basic security check that they should all do. If every other state does it, why can't those states? So Florida, as you say, can count them all on the same day with signature checks. So I don't know why Iowa can't. So anyway, so I'll just throw that out there. But it's not a reason for him to talk about everything being fraudulent and bullshit because none of those states matter. No. So anyway, so just throwing it out there, being fair.
Yeah.
Do you? By the way, I'll give someone a tick because we're doing lots of crosses. Someone will give someone a tick. Rubio. Rubio's got a good plan. He really does. His plan. I'll put.
I'll give him a tick for not making up the fact that he has a son.
There we go.
That's
a Matt Gaetz reference.
Okay?
Right, okay.
Pretty good.
Okay.
For a Florida congressman.
He's got this plan where you have harsh penalties for election interference. Yeah, whatever. And this is the one I love the best. He wants to move the counting date back. This is something I talked about on the show on Wednesday. From December 8th to January 1. And that's a big one because they are not going to be finished on December 8th. And if they're not finished by December 8th, I don't know what the fuck happens. That's when you go to court because they legally need to be finished by December 8th. as far as the counting. After that, you can start challenging the counts in Congress and in the Senate. And that's when you start having problems, right? And the Electoral College...
Was California finished by December 8th last time?
I got no idea. I'm talking for the presidential elections.
I'm thinking, because California took... I remember
in 2018, it took forever.
In 2016, it took forever.
I don't know.
Not that the result was in doubt, but certainly...
Well, the Electoral College meets by law on December 14.
Yes.
So they need to have the numbers for Electoral College, at the very least, by December 14. Once again, that's too early. So, and Rubio's plan is to move that back to January.
Yeah.
And that's a great idea.
Good on you, Marco.
There you go. See, pat on the head for Rubio. And he's got a bunch of other bullshit. But that's the one which I really like. Anyway.
Well, didn't think I'd be heaping praise on Marco Rubio today.
Well, you didn't. But you
gave
him a little pat. That's enough of Malin voting. You know what you hadn't had for a while, Dr. Dave?
What haven't we had?
Stats Nugget! I'll just put a note for Hand of God to put a little sting then. Okay. Democracy Fund Voter Study Group put out a poll talking about dysfunction of voting. 38% of Democrats say it would be appropriate for a candidate to call for a do-over if they win the popular vote but lose the Electoral College. 38%. But wait, just over 20% of both Democrat and Republican respondents believe violence is at least somewhat justified if their side loses the election.
At least somewhat justified.
That's up. That's up from 5 to 10% supporting potentially political violence in 2018.
Okay, that's disturbing, but there's a great new book on political violence in America and the historical context of it. It is by my old Michigan buddy, Nathan Kalmoe. He is an associate professor at Louisiana State University.
Yeah, what's it called?
And the book, I believe, is called With Ballots and Bullets. And it is about the role that partisanship played in the US Civil War. It is out in, I think, a week or two's time.
Wow, that's it.
I'm very much
hot off the press.
Very much looking forward to this.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, it might be crap. So why are we putting on the book?
No, it's not going to be crap. It is going to be very good.
Okay, I'll trust you.
Yes.
Let's go on the polling. This is going to be your area because I only have one polling thing.
Right.
The only polling thing is that there was a battleground poll from Lake/Goius, who I've barely heard of.
Never heard of them.
Amongst possible 2020 voters who have turned 18 since 2016. Take a guess. Take a guess what percentage support Trump?
20?
6. 94 to 6 support Biden.
Oh dear, that's a bit grim.
That's a strong future.
Uncle
right
Joe.
Okay,
Uncle
Dave.
Joe, popular with the kids.
Talk to us about polling.
Okay, so 538 has unveiled its long-awaited electoral forecast model, which was something that alarmed people a little bit when they unveiled it, because when they unveiled it yesterday, they're like, okay, well, Biden's got a 71% chance of winning. Trump's got a 28% chance of winning.
That's a familiar number.
And guess what, guys? This is exactly what we had on the eve of the election last year.
Yeah, 2016.
And once again, this is much more sort of Trump-friendly than a lot of the other forecasts.
Although, to be fair, having a 72% chance this far out is a lot better than a 72% chance the day before the election.
Yes. Now, Nate Silver did point that out. He kind of buried that a little bit because I think he wanted the drama.
Yeah, sure.
He did bury it. He said that this is basically all about the uncertainty because we're so far out.
Yeah.
So he said last time around that was, the day before. If the election was held tomorrow, Biden would actually be at 93%. Right, okay. And to give you an idea of the role that temporal uncertainty plays in the model, so their model gives Trump a 19% chance of winning the popular vote, which is, that's way more of a chance than I would give him. But it also gives Biden a 19% chance of winning the vote in Alaska. Right. So that's the kinds of probabilities that we're talking about. Because Silver is very proud of the fact it's an epistemologically conservative model. It takes all kinds of potential sources of error into account, although he excludes extra-constitutional shenanigans from that. So I think, it's like all of these things, as long as you understand what it is and what's gone into it, and they do a very admirable job of explaining it, I think it's quite valuable. Some interesting little tidbits from it. They've actually got Minnesota as the most likely tipping point state.
I think I might have changed since then. I think today, because I looked at it today.
Yes.
Yeah. Today I think it's Pennsylvania.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So, but anyway, they've still, it's the upper Midwest is where they see it being won or lost. More on that a little bit later. Just some other, really with what the polls have been doing over the last month is we have seen a tightening, although still a tightening that would leave Biden as a fairly clear winner.
So it's gone from like 9 points to 7.5 points.
Yeah, what I see as emblematic of the shift is, Fox News went from 9 points in June, 8 points in July, 7 points in August. I think that's a fairly good indicator of the kind of shift that we're talking about. This is sort of broadly mirrored in the poll averages as well. The both poll averages from Real Clear Politics and 538, they are a little bit sensitive to outlier polls. So when there was a Harris X Hill poll that had like a 3-point difference, that dragged the margin down. But then Georgetown University came out with a poll that had Biden 13 points in front, which sent it back out again.
Yeah.
Now, before you get too excited about that one, that poll did not weight by education.
Which is the problem back in 2016.
Yes, 60% of the respondents were college educated.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
not to go too deeply into that vote. It was believed that with live voice polls where you're using really random sampling methods that you shouldn't need to wait because you are getting a random part of the population. Unfortunately, from a forecasting point of view, what came out of that election was there are a group of people who are more likely to vote than they are to respond to a poll, and those are non-college educated Americans. Yeah. So you don't want a poll that is 60% college educated because that's not going to be anything like what the electorate looks like. Nate Cohn from the New York Times did what you're really not supposed to do with polls, but he did it with a fair degree of transparency, which is he unskewed it. So he said, okay, if we actually do apply survey weights that would reach targets, what do we get? Biden came out with a 9-point win from that. So it's not a complete disaster, but 13 points, we wouldn't be expecting that.
What I would do with this, by the way, I'm not Nate Silver. People who listen to this podcast,
you're not.
People who listen to this podcast would know better than anyone that I get a lot of things wrong. So you probably shouldn't trust me very much. But the way I approach polling, because of precisely these issues you just described, is I never look at the national polling.
Never look at it.
No, I look at it, but I never.
Avert your eyes.
I never pay any real attention to it. What I look straight at, and the 538 is very good for this, is I look at that tipping point state.
Yes.
And I look at the average poll for that tipping point state.
What is the average poll for Pennsylvania right now?
5.
Yeah.
5 margin. And back when Biden was ahead by 9 or 10, it was 6.
Yes, right, absolutely.
And so it's basically been very consistent between 5 and 6 points basically the whole year.
Yes.
And so and that hasn't changed much. And so while the averages go up and down, that tipping point state, the actual state itself will change all the time, like we just saw. It changes every day. But the margin does not change so much.
Yes.
So that gives you an idea of where you're at.
Yeah. I think what Trump would have cause to be optimistic about at the moment is, once again, we have seen his floor did not crack because of the pandemic. Interestingly, the pandemic hasn't dragged his approval rating down to its lowest point yet. It never went below 40%, and it's ticking up above 41% again. Yeah. As long as he's got that floor, he's always going to be in striking distance.
Absolutely.
So he would have to be happy about that. Also, it does seem that, the news has been so bad for so long, both on the viral numbers and the economic numbers. Any improvement's going to help him at this point. Yeah. So that, like, an incredibly low bar, an incredibly warped curve is going to help him. And, which is, on the one hand, terrible, but on the other hand, it just shows where the United States is mentally at the moment. That, any improvement is good news.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, also, there's just a general reversion to mean always. And the mean with Biden and Trump is about 6 points.
Yes. Now, let's talk about some things that Biden would have a great deal, of course, to be optimistic about.
Yes.
First of all, regardless of what the margin is between he and Trump, the number of polls I'm seeing that put him at 50% or above mean that that's a lot better. Him being at 50 to 45 over Trump, that's way better than Hillary Clinton being at 45 to 38.
Absolutely.
Over Trump.
And just to reiterate why I always say this, but it's worth saying it again. Once you're at 50% against an incumbent, it means people who've decided not to re-elect the incumbent after 4 years need to change their mind in the last couple of months, which is very unlikely. So once a challenger to an incumbent hits 50%, that's real red siren time for the incumbent.
Another thing is, it's obviously polls are considered the main source of information, but there are other sources of information that suggest that Trump is in trouble that have been around since the 2018 election, which is how elections have gone since 2018. There have basically not been any signs of comfort for Republicans since 2018 in terms of how elections have gone, in terms of the kind of, so far, COVID hasn't actually dampened Democratic turnout in elections at all.
It went up in Wisconsin.
We're seeing huge Democratic turnout.
Yeah.
We are seeing very left-wing Democrats winning their primaries easily. Yeah. There's just, and I think this was visible from 2018. There is really a massive movement to get rid of Trump that is at least as enthusiastic as the pro-Trump movement is. Yeah. That is not an asset that Hillary Clinton had back in 2016. And then there's a third factor that I want to talk about, which is the Big 10 and the Big 12 cancelling college football.
Okay.
This is a Michigan corner. Okay, so.
It's the Michigan corner.
We're going to put it in. Okay.
This is me dancing to music we can't hear.
Let me explain the significance of this, because this did not get in the news much in Australia, but it is highly significant. So 2 conferences out of the big 5 college football conferences announced there won't be any play this year. Those are the Big 12, which is basically a bunch of red states: Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas.
They need another adjective. Everything can't be big.
Everything can be big in America, Chaz.
Okay.
But more significantly, the Big 10. States included in the Big 10 include Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Ohio, and Iowa.
Oh.
In other words, the entire suite of states in which the election could be decided if for some reason Florida is not a factor.
That's a good pickup.
Yeah. So, what is the significance of college football not being played in those states? Well, it's a massive marker of normalcy and comfort in those states. This is very different from, say, the NFL being cancelled for a lot of reasons. First of all, every NFL team, with the exception of Green Bay, is located in a major metropolitan area. College football is far more kind of spread across the country. It's very popular in rural areas of the country. And so a team like Ohio State, that is not just Ohio State University and all its alumni. Well, admittedly, that's very impressive because it's got 55,000 people. Or Penn State, which has an alumni network of 600,000. It's not even just them. The whole state is behind Ohio State. The whole state is behind Penn State football. Michigan's a little bit different because it's divided between University of Michigan and Michigan State, but University of Wisconsin, University of Minnesota, these are all places which are not going to have college football in the fall. That is going to be really depressing for a lot of people. That is going to be a huge sign that things are nowhere near normal. It's going to be crushing to morale. That is why Trump and Pence were both tweeting out frantically, let them play, let them play. It's not going to happen. Another interesting little aside on this. Back in 2010, Andrew Healy, Neil Malhotra, and Cynthia Moe had a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, which was about...
Come on.
No, PNAS is a real journal.
You're
Look
making
it
this
up.
up.
PNAS. You can actually...
This is a prank.
This is not a gated article. You can find this online. Put it in the reading
It
list.
should be. PNAS.
Put this PNAS article in the reading list. Anyway,
Okay, all right.
what they were interested in was whether factors that were actually irrelevant to government could affect elections, right? Are there things that just make people good or make people feel bad right before an election that affect the way that they vote? Interesting question, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is statistically a really, really hard thing to figure out because it's actually very hard to find something which can't be in any way attributed to the government or to politics. So what they alighted on were college football results, right? Because this is something you actually can't trace to the government and politics, as much as some politicians have been deeply involved, like Richard Nixon, who basically declared the University of Texas the national champions in 1969 on its own, much to the disgust of Penn State University. Joe Paterno, their coach, although who gives a fuck what he thinks anymore. But anyway, so they were looking at college football was their exogenous instrument. And what they found, so they weren't actually setting out to find how does college football affect how they vote. They were looking for what's a neutral instrument.
Gotcha, yeah.
But now, 10 years on, this actually has some very interesting implications. They found that a win by the home team on the week before the election in a county which is heavily attentive to college football, that's 2.5% for the incumbent party.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's one of those things that in these razor-tight Midwestern races, you know, they could just provide a little bit of an edge.
Okay, what's this called, this PNAS article?
I can't actually remember what it's called, but it's by Andrew Healy, Neil Malhotra, and Cynthia
Healy.
Moe.
Neela, was it Neela?
Malhotra, M-A-L-H-O-T-R. This is a real,
Cynthia Moe. Gotcha.
this is a real Australia all over moment.
This is great. This is great radio.
Yes.
Sorry to SER.
Fantastic. Yeah, but anyway, so Trump and Pence, they recognise that college football not being there, it's this symbol of autumnal normalcy that is missing, and that hurts them. Also, I mean, a major thing about college football is you support your team. There are 120 teams that play college football, so it's not like the NFL where people actually sort of follow the whole league and they'll watch it on a Sunday afternoon going back and forth between games depending on who's scoring and they're following their fantasy players. No, college football is not like that. College football is about very intimate loyalties to your team. So if it's not being played in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Minnesota and Iowa, it doesn't matter that it is being played in Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi because they will never cancel college football. They could have a guarantee that 100% of players will die. They will still play. But it doesn't matter that it's happening in the South.
Gotcha.
It's the fact that it's not happening in the Midwest that is significant.
Okay, that is good info.
Yeah,
that's our takeaway. I'm gonna put that in the blurb. Go from the sublime to the ridiculous. Kanye watch. I'll be very quick, but he's in the news this week. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
All right. Now, first of all, I'm gonna do a bit of fake news here. There was a
fake news.
There was a day there where they were saying, "Oh, Kanye West admitted he was a spoiler candidate." Because of this Forbes article. He always speaks to Forbes for some reason. That's the only publication he speaks to. Anyway.
Look, we've all got our preferences about things.
I'm going to read you the quote from Forbes that started all these articles.
Okay.
West was eager to criticise Biden and express comfort with the idea of doing damage to the former vice president's White House chances. Quote, "I'm not denying it. I just told you." Okay.
That's a very Kanye quote.
I'm not denying it. I just told you it was a very Kanye quote, but the rest is a paraphrase. Why aren't they giving us the rest of the context? Why is this weird little, he kind of said this and kind of said that? Why don't you give us the quotes? This is from an interview. That's all the information.
Who's not giving us the...
That's the Forbes article.
Oh, yeah. I do not like this when they do...
They conduct interviews and then
you
paraphrase
do see this in interviews from time to time where you just see basically a fragment.
Yeah.
And admittedly, often the reason why they cut stuff out is because human speech is not very readable. But why did they cut this out?
Yeah, I mean, that was the key moment of this particular interview. And almost all of it, all the valuable context, is not quotes. And so when I see that, my ears prick up and I go, oh, yeah, okay, sure. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not going to believe that until I see.
Show us the transcript,
exactly,
Forbes.
Exactly, bloody Forbes. Stop talking to them, Kanye. There's a lot of other public. Talk to PEP, Kanye.
You know, my
Kanye
first consciousness of Forbes was, do you remember Steve Forbes?
I do
Had a
remember very
brief
well.
primary campaign.
Steve Forbes
in 1996, running on a flat tax. He never actually made it to a contest.
I don't want to be cruel.
Yeah.
I don't want to be cruel, but do you remember in Men in Black when the aliens had this loose-fitting skin?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's Steve Forbes. Anyway, try and be a person. Anyway, okay, a few other things. Kanye West obviously said he was meeting with Jared Kushner.
Yeah.
Although he said it was to talk about the Powernomics book. Now,
what I don't like about this is the Trump campaign is doing all this stuff which is potentially illegal. But it would be Kanye who gets punished for it.
Yes.
That's really shit.
Yeah, but this is the thing. When you see that, it's easy to be cynical and go, well, he's just a Republican stooge. He's been set up to do this. Like, this is obviously a tactic from the Trump campaign. And it may well be. I'm not saying it's not. But all I'm saying, I mean, Sam Nunberg openly admitted that he introduced Trump to the woman who handed in Kanye's forms in Wisconsin.
Yes, 14 seconds late, by the way.
This is the thing. This is where I'm going. If they were Republican rat fuckers, they'd be better than this. Because
especially in Wisconsin. That's like the land of... I think
there's no traffic in Wisconsin. There's no excuse to be 14 seconds late.
I think what's happened is some Republicans have seen potential in this.
Yeah.
I think that, but it's not... As you say, if they were seriously putting effort into this, it would look very, very different.
Do you know what happened in New Jersey?
Operation.
So let's finish Wisconsin first. Like just what Dave was referring to. They handed in as 5 o'clock was the deadline. They handed in at 5 o'clock, 14 seconds.
Yeah.
And they're now suing Wisconsin because they're saying that after 5 o'clock, which is what it says in no later than 5 o'clock is what it says in the law. That means no later than that means that it needs to be 5:01.
Yeah.
Before 5 o'clock and 14 seconds, not after 5 o'clock, according to them. Anyway.
Also, the signatures, like a lot of them are just obvious.
But this is what I was going to say. New Jersey, his application got rejected because every single signature was the same person. I think Kanye thinks when it says 10,000 signatures, it could be the one person signing 10,000 times.
Imagine who had the job of doing that.
Anyway.
One of the signatures on the Wisconsin one was someone calling himself Bernie Sanders.
I don't think it was the real one. So, okay, so they're amateur hour, right? And you know what they're doing? Like I told you a couple of weeks ago about how he tweeted out for people to sign his ballot to sign for him in South Carolina the weekend after the deadline. The place where they're really running hard at the moment is Montana.
Yeah, this is...
They're trying to get him on the ballot in Montana. These are not real Republicans. These are not real Republicans.
Obviously, Wisconsin could matter. But if this was a well-orchestrated rat-fucking operation, you wouldn't expect Arkansas, New Jersey, and Montana.
I don't think this is a legit
I've
Republican
read the stuff
operation.
about like the guy from Arkansas who's congratulating himself on getting... Kanye on the ballot. Like, dude, be careful. This was the state where a poll, admittedly not a very good one, showed a Democrat within 5 points.
That's true. Just quickly, polls, because remember I talked to you about, I said my theory with Kanye was that as soon as some polls came out that showed him on minus 4%, he would lose interest. Well, a poll's come out, Morning Consult poll, 2% of the vote from registered voters for Kanye, no opinion was on 9%. 2% from black voters, 6% from young voters, favourables, 12% amongst Democrats, 24% amongst Republicans. So that might backfire. The margin between Biden and Trump after Kanye was added, unaffected.
Oh, well,
So
there you go.
there you go. That's enough Kanye.
Okay. Can we talk about...
Israel.
Okay,
Go for
yes.
it.
So there was this moment today billed by many media outlets as a historic peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Now, this kind of came out of nowhere. basically Benjamin Netanyahu and the leader of the UAE, who I'll defer to the American pronunciation, MBZ, signed this agreement to normalise diplomatic relations between Israel and the UAE. They did it at the White House with Trump. Trump hailing this as this historic peace deal. Look at what a great deal maker I am. Netanyahu gives this absolutely gloating press conference afterwards, telling Israeli journalists, none of you thought that I could do peace with the Arabs. Well, look at this. Okay, let's have a look at, what do you think when you hear the term historic peace deal?
I think of war. War's been over.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
The UAE and
war
Israel,
over?
not only have they never, ever been at war, the UAE and Israel were holding joint Air Force operations in 2017.
That is something I hadn't heard before.
Yeah.
That is good.
Typically not something that two countries with a hostile relationship do. Okay, so this is the first very important piece of context. The UAE and Israel have actually been cooperating with each other both above the radar and below the radar for quite a long time. And really what brings them together is both of them see Iran as a very significant enemy.
Yep.
Both of them have leaders who have seen the Trump White House as a major opportunity to advance themselves. So MBZ particularly has really cultivated Jared Kushner and has basically seen Kushner as an opportunity to elevate himself above Saudi Arabia in the who is Trump's favourite Gulf state stakes. There's been, intelligence cooperation between Israel and the UAE. Even on a sort of broader public diplomacy level, there's been quite a bit of cooperation, athletes being hosted by each other.
So why didn't they have normalised relations before now then?
Well, so there'd always been this sort of series of irritations that have been flaring up. Quite a few of them flared up around 2010. There is this norm among most of the 22 states of the Arab League that you don't recognise Israel, you don't normalise diplomatic relations with Israel, you don't allow aircraft to fly over Israel. So with Emirates Airlines, I'm not sure if they're one of the ones that, won't even label Israel on their flight map, but certainly there weren't any Emirates flights to Israel. This is to maintain face with the Arab world and with the Palestinians. Okay, so what happened here then? Why did we get, so having established it's not actually that big a deal, I mean, it will have consequences in terms of, Emirates flights to Jerusalem and things like the first thing I thought of was that there'll be major tourism. So it's not consequence free, but it's not an historic peace deal. Okay, so why did this actually happen? Well, there was a huge amount of very convenient image laundering happening for all three parties involved.
Yeah.
Okay, so the UAE, their name is mud throughout the world at the moment because of what they've been doing in Yemen.
Yep.
Right, their human rights abuses in Yemen are very difficult to ignore. United States Congress doesn't ignore them, even if
Mike Pompeo does.
Yeah, Mike Pompeo does.
Yep.
Right, so he is in constant. MBZ is in constant need of image laundering.
Yep.
Benjamin Netanyahu. Not only did it take him 3 elections to form a government, he's still facing corruption charges. He might go to a 4th election to try to avoid it next year. And having initially Israel managed COVID fairly well, now it's having a catastrophically bad outbreak, makes Victoria look like New Zealand kind of outbreak. He is hugely unpopular, right? So he was in need of some image laundering. And Trump, well, he needed an international win, right?
Yeah.
And he promised peace in the Middle East. And, if you squint hard enough, Israel and the UAE normalising relations, well, let's face it, most of the media showed today they don't actually look very closely at the details. They're like, oh, Israel and an Arab country, peace, cool. So that was, so first of all, good opportunity for Trump to claim a win. Now, second, if you look at what Netanyahu offered, a lot was made out of this. He's not going to go through with annexing the West Bank.
I made something of this. So go on, yeah.
He wasn't going to annex the West Bank.
Oh, you never thought that was going to happen?
No. He might have thought he wanted to. I think it was more something he was saying to get the settler vote in the election. Also, as a way of signalling to the country as a whole, look, Trump will let us do whatever the fuck we want. I'm saying I'm going to do this and Trump's not doing anything to stop me. He's trying to get me reelected, right? No, it would have been almost impossible for him to actually carry through that plan, not just because of the international backlash, which even the US didn't like it, just the logistics of it, the kind of domestic revolt. This is not something that was on the order of the US moving its embassy. This would have been the most serious move that Israel had made in years.
Oh yeah, that's what I was worried about.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't ever actually going to do this, right? So basically, he gives up on something. No, I mean he's still playing it all kinds of ways. He's still telling the settlers that he's planning to do it. He told Trump, "Oh, I was going to do it, but then you convinced me otherwise," right? No, but the simple fact is he had to abandon it because it was impossible. He got this prize of diplomatic recognition from an Arab, a rich Arab state out of it, one that could open up tourism. So great, win for him. And as for the United Arab Emirates, not only are they laundering their image by saying, look, we're the reasonable ones here in terms of making nice with Israel, they also get to claim we saved the Palestinians. We stopped Netanyahu from annexing it. Now, not surprisingly, that is not how the Palestinians see it at all. Palestinians have called bullshit on this, right? They understand that the more significant thing here is basically this is a signal to the Palestinians the wealthy Gulf states are not going to back you, right? And MBZ having done this, it's not inconceivable that Saudi Arabia will do something fairly similar in the near future. Now, it's not exactly news to the Palestinians that the wealthy Gulf states don't have their back, but this is a symbolically very kind of jarringly final way of saying that they don't. So, in sum, not actually that important diplomatically, could have some important economic effects. Much more importantly, basically, these three leaders, Trump, Netanyahu, and MBZ, have all been helping each other politically for the last few years. This is a continuation of that. It was basically a pact between politicians rather than a pact between countries. It allowed all of them to do a useful bit of image laundering, and it is absolutely depressing how much the media just took this hook, line, and sinker. Historic peace agreement between countries that were holding joint Air Force exercises in 2017. What a fucking joke.
I've got nothing to add because I haven't read about it because it happened today, and I had to comment on the show and I said almost nothing, but the very little that I said, you've just shamed. There's only one way to come back, and it's with a stats nugget. There we go. Fox News.
Fox News.
Dr. Dave.
Tell us about Fox News.
It was the highest rating channel in prime time, 8 to 11 p.m. in June and July in America.
In America.
I didn't say cable channel.
Really? Bigger
I said
than the broadcast
TV
networks.
channel. It was rating higher than the broadcast networks.
Yes.
Now, June, July means summer, means repeats, especially in COVID time.
Also, as a caveat, that 8 to 11 time slot means that's past the evening news.
Yes,
right.
but,
So it's still
but that's prime time.
Yeah.
That is, it's not just prime time for Fox News, it's prime time for everyone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but no one's watching fucking TV in summer.
Well, this is the thing. It is summer. It is
Yeah,
summer.
yeah.
There's repeats, all the rest of it. That does not mean Fox News is now the
Remember
number
the
one
Troy
channel.
McClure. It's Troy and Company's Summertime Smile Factory.
Exactly. I'm not claiming that this means that it's the number one channel. Full stop.
Yeah.
But still, that surprised me.
Yeah, the fact that the Tucker Carlson White Power Hour is number one. It's disturbing.
There were only 2 days when Fox News didn't rate extremely well in this primetime hour. Can you guess what they were?
No.
Okay. During two funerals. George Floyd.
Oh, right.
And John Lewis.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, you, off the bat, made the point about the nightly news is not during 8 to 11 p.m., and you're right. The nightly news still rates higher than Fox News. In the case of David Muir, which is the number one rated nightly news, he rates twice as much as Fox News in prime time. So people aren't getting primarily their news from Fox News yet.
Yes.
But still, it's still a lot higher than I thought. So
By
I just
the way,
thought I'd bring
interesting
it up.
little nugget as well. Another Michigan nugget.
Oh, yes.
In most places around the country, there's an evening news bulletin at 11.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
This is, for many people, this is a sort of going to bed ritual.
Sure.
Is watching that. Except in Metro Detroit when it's at 10, because they pride themselves on the fact that they get up early in Detroit to go to work.
That's why they're so wise in Detroit. Oh, I actually, before I skip off the ratings, just a little. They did bring back a fresh reality show, Big Brother, big debut the other night. That was finally some new programming on the major networks, right? Big Brother, woo! Big Brother was watched by 3.7 million viewers. Tucker Carlson tonight, 3.9. Hannity, 4 million. They're still ahead. So there we go. Anyway, you don't have long, do you?
No, I don't have long at
Okay.
all. About 5 minutes. What are we going to talk about?
Let's just throw around let's skip the general COVID stuff. I've been a month waiting for study centre. I've got some great studies. I'm telling
we
you.
can do that next week. Or get some guest on.
Let's
who
talk.
all they'll do is listen to you talk about study.
The problem is I can't get guests on at the moment because Schmitty's sick. As soon as he's back, we'll get some guests. I've had a guest waiting for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's a good guest too. Anyway.
I know.
Yeah, you know who it is. Okay, let's just talk about the standoff, shall we? The stimulus standoff, COVID stimulus standoff. With the memoranda and the executive orders. And all the rest of it.
I think that the key point here is Trump had lost any control he might have had of any negotiating process when he made Mark Meadows his chief of staff.
Yeah, Mark Meadows, he's
Meadows,
a suicide bomber.
Former
essentially.
leader of the Tea Party caucus. His commitment is to not getting a deal.
Yeah, he's good at destroying things.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah. Now he did this. I in a horrible way. You can sort of admire the political skill of he basically managed to achieve that goal while convincing Trump he was going to have a big political win with these announcements of measures that would do nothing.
Yeah. I'll say this. The student loan one would do something. The student loan one, that was.
Does that actually have any legal force at all?
Yes, it does. The student loan one is,
Okay,
in my view,
Yeah.
this is the one where, just for people who don't know, instructs the Education Department to temporarily suspend payments and interest because under federal law, the Education Department is in charge of that entirely. So he actually can do that. Now that's not private universities. It's only public universities.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not everyone.
No.
But it's someone. So there are people out there, unlike the unemployment benefits and stuff like that, that will happen.
Yes.
Right? So that's one thing.
Yeah.
But the rest ain't going to happen.
Yeah, no. So for those of you not familiar with this wondrous suite of executive orders, there was at least a nod to deal with an extremely serious issue, which is evictions, as I mentioned earlier. 23 million Americans facing evictions.
And there was literally a nod saying, try and find out a way to
directing
improve this.
federal agencies to try to find a way to do it. Nothing. Okay. Yeah. The unemployment insurance, where he made it look as if he was taking this middle path between the Democrat 600 and the Republican 200, but actually what he's offering people is nothing. Because you would have to set up a separate agency to deal with this. That would take months. Even if you could just miraculously get the FEMA money out the door, we're talking $50 billion.
Yes.
Estimated that would last 5 weeks.
Yes.
And even if this scheme was administered, states would have to be chucking in $100 for every $300 the federal government chucks in. They can't afford to do it.
Although a lot of people said that. I will just say this, that they did say in the memorandum that the $100 could come from the coronavirus fund. So
great. So let's take money that is needed to fight the coronavirus.
I'm not saying it's great. I'm just saying the states don't necessarily need to pay for it themselves. Yeah. Like they had to have that $100 because under the law, when you're taking out the disaster relief fund, the states have to supply a quarter of it. Mm-hmm. But they basically it was an accountancy shuffle. But you're right. They have to set up an agency. That's not going to happen. And if they did manage to make it happen, I made the point on Wednesday night. If they actually make that happen, they are about to get hit by a whole bunch of hurricanes.
Yes.
Big hurricanes. It's projected to be the worst hurricane season ever.
Yeah.
If they drain the disaster relief fund directly before that, oh my God, that would not be good for the election.
Yeah.
Right. So that would be a big, big problem.
So anyway, these executive orders, it was purely about the announcement. Yeah. Because before the election, people are not going to get their checks. And they will notice that. It won't matter that Trump announced that they were going to get $400. Yeah. They're going to notice.
They will notice that they're poor.
Yes. when they. But my favourite executive order of all, the last minute, was just before these ones. It was the executive order ordering insurance companies to cover people with pre-existing conditions.
To be fair, that a lot of people were saying, but Obamacare covers that already. Remember, Trump did bring in those dodgy short-term health insurance plans last year by executive order. Those ones don't have pre-existing conditions. So he's covering his own fuck
fixing a problem that he created, doing something that the Affordable Care Act is supposed to do, which, by the way, he is trying to dismantle it in
I was going to say,
the Supreme
that's my
Court.
theory. I have a theory on this. My theory is he's trying to give the Supreme Court permission to get rid of Obamacare. To say, you know what, if you get rid of Obamacare, pre-existing conditions is covered.
I'm beginning to suspect that John Roberts kind of likes Obamacare.
I'm starting to get that.
Anyway, on that note, Peppers, I have got to go.
Just before you go, all right, you can go read this out. I've got my favourite bit of the standoff.
Yes,
is a Trump tweet from back from 2012, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
There's always a tweet file. Yes,
that's right. You know, this is him talking about. Actually, it was a quote. It was a quote to CNN. He's talking about Obama signing executive orders.
Yeah.
You know, it's supposed to be negotiated. You're supposed to cajole, get people in a room. You have Republicans, Democrats. You're supposed to get together and pass a law. Obama doesn't want to do that because it's too much work. So he doesn't want to work too hard. He wants to go back and play golf. Guess where those executive orders were signed?
Oh, they were signed on the golf course.
On the links.
Is that where he had that bizarre press conference?
Yes.
Press conference with mainly his golf friends?
His golf friends, yeah. Anyway.
He ended up storming out. Anyway.
So much more to cover.
Have a good weekend.
Hopefully we'll get a PEP together. A guest PEP on Wednesday.
Guest on,
hopefully we'll get a guest on Wednesday. It's coming soon. They're coming soon. I think I'm getting a feeling this might be the time.
Excellent.
We'll see. Thanks, guys. See you later. Bye.